All right, so I think it's time. So shall we start?
Yeah.
All right. So hi everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sam Eshima, member of the SGAC. Before we start, I'd like to introduce SGAC a little bit. For those who don't know what SGAC is, SGAC stands for the Space Generation Advisory Council. It is supported by the United Nations program on space applications, and it's a non-governmental, nonprofit organization. And Bernadette here, which is today's guest, is also the member of SGAC and is the regional coordinator of the Asia-Pacific region. So with that, I'll hand it over to Bernadette to sort of introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sam. Yeah, good morning, everyone, or good evening, wherever you are. So my name is Bernadette Joy. I'm from the Philippines, but now I'm here in Japan. I'm a graduate student here in Keio University, Graduate School of System Design and Management. So yeah, as Sam mentioned, I'm the regional coordinator of SGAC here in the Asia Pacific region. But before that, I was the national point of contact for the Philippines. So we do have these NPoC for countries all over the world. And yeah, we do have now like regional coordinators for the region. And yeah, now I'm researching on applications basically of space technology to our society. So we can talk about it much more in detail in a few minutes. So yeah, thank you.
Right. Just to sort of clarify, you've mentioned you're the NPoC, National Point of Contact for the Philippines.
Yeah.
Taka here and me are the National Point of Contact for Japan, and what we basically do is, for instance, answer questions from like people from other countries or host events in Japan, which SGAC. In contrast, what does the regional coordinator that you're doing right now actually do?
Yes. So regional coordinators are their responsibility is much larger in a sense. So I mean, geographically, right? Like we are in charge of managing the NPoC team right now, and also I think one of the key role is also to communicate the the SGAC executive board to the NPoCs. So, of course, SGAC has its own mission and vision and, plans as an organization at a high level. And the NPoCs, like we do have our own plans just for our country, right? So, we are kind of bridging the two together. And at the same time, look for partnerships, for example, or potential like sponsors or partners for the region, so that we we have a more prolific space activities here in the Asia Pacific. So it's kind of general, but yeah, basically it's like a one step ahead and much broader responsibility.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, if whoever's watching this is interested in SGAC, please join us. It's free to join. So with that, I'd like to get into some space stuff. So you've mentioned that you're doing research on space applications in society.
Yeah.
What do you actually do as a research?
Yeah, I think I would like to quickly mention my background as well. My background was not in space, so it was industrial engineering. And it's it's not space. And I've worked for a few years in the consultancy industry in the Philippines, which is not again related to space, but at the same time, like I'm doing these like volunteer work for SGAC. And yeah, so just last year, I started to kind of change my trajectory and just enrolled here in Japan in Keio University. And now, so our laboratory is called Sensing and Design Lab. So this graduate school in this program actually is systems engineering, but I think the point is that we try to use satellite data and other space technology to come up with some design solution. And I think like the key point is the society. I mean, you don't just build a product or like build a satellite. I mean, for me, it's more about like how we utilize the data that we get from the satellite, for example. I mean, like yeah, we can do a lot of things, developing spacecrafts and satellites. So, but I think my focus is the downstream part of the value stream. So, making more out of what we have, out of the space technology and the infrastructure that we have, considering the social aspect. So, that is one of the unique aspects of our graduate school. It's called system design and management, right? So there's management involved. So it's not just like the technical engineering skills that you learn. So it's also about like applying it to applying it to real life problems here on Earth, right? So I want to use like what we have in space to solve problems here on Earth, basically. And yeah, specifically like right now, I'm working on the vessel monitoring systems. So as you know, we have so in the fishing industry, right? So we have these AIS, automatic identification system. So it's basically like a sensor, right? So it tracks the position of the fishing vessels at sea, because we have traffic at sea as well, right? And we want to avoid like ship collision, etc. So basically, you have that tracker, but my focus is more on the small scale fishing. So for example, yeah, not like the big ships that we have for seafood, but like the small fishermen in the fishing community. So they are actually much larger in number. So yeah, there's so many of them, and it's addressing the SDGs, food security as well. So yeah, the point is that like they also need to be managed, right? So they also need to be tracked somehow, and they have these like social needs that needs to be addressed, and we can use space technology for that, specifically like the GNSS receivers that we have. I mean, it's getting much more cheaper to do that right now, and we have a lot of satellite imagery, satellite data to come up with a variety of solutions in that aspect. So yeah, that's generally it without going into much detail.
Is that so? Is that like specifically for like a certain country, or is it like for general use?
Yeah, this is for the Philippines initially. Like the context is the Philippines, because I mean here in Japan it's different, right? But I mean, of course, like it can be like applied to other countries as well, especially in the ASEAN region, where like we produce like a lot of fish globally, right? Like we are the main source somehow of fish, like because like the Philippines is it's an island nation. Like we have a lot of islands, right? So we have a lot of water and fishing. So fishing is really like a main source of livelihood for a lot of people, and like Indonesia and Vietnam and so on.
Okay. Before I forget, for those who are listening right now, feel free to ask questions through the chat, and we'll answer those. So if I know if you have questions, please post it anytime you want. Okay, so you've mentioned, so you're studying in Japan right now, right? And doing
Yes.
research in Japan. Okay. So what does your lab do, like, besides, like, your research on sort of fishing and using those data?
You mean our lab?
Or
Or like,
yeah, you're.
yeah, but yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we do a lot of different things because this graduate school and this lab is very diverse, and that's like the point. So this is a interdisciplinary graduate school, and my lab specifically is not. It's not just about space. We also have like data-driven sports. We're using satellite data to improve the performance of athletes, for example. So those kind of things. It's not just limited to space, but basically you sense data, right? So you have multiple sources of data, and that's what you consider as your sensors to design something, some solution. And it the basic foundation is, you use systems thinking and design thinking as well in the process. So yeah, sensing and design.
Could you elaborate a little more on, like, this system design and those two design philosophies that you mentioned? Like, how do you combine those two?
Hmm. Yeah. So systems engineering, I think, yeah, some of you might be familiar with it already, especially like, space systems engineering. And we utilize, logical thinking and thinking as a system, right? So like thinking, I mean, everything can be a system depending on how you see it and who you ask. But yeah, so that's systems thinking in a sense. So yeah, you not just take a look at just the part, right, but the system as a whole. So not just the yeah, it's not just about the tree, it's about the forest. And it's not just about the forest, it's also about the trees and the connection of those trees. And design thinking on the other end, it's mainly used, yeah, it's not, I think, that common yet, but we have a lot of different ways to do like design thinking. But it's basically, yeah, like viewing the design methodologies that we have. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that when you develop a product or something. um, yeah, so you ideate and you prototype, and then you iterate the process. So it's kind of like it's, for me, it's like a mix of like art and science as
Okay.
well. Yeah.
So is that, like, sort of like trying to come up with an idea, then, like, that sort of design thinking?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, like a
So then,
good idea.
okay. So then, like, how do you do that? Like, so, like, do you just, like, think a lot, or is there, like, a developed method of, like, developing an product or an idea?
Yeah, that's a good question. So our graduate school has its own way of doing it. So like there's so because they want us to like develop that skill, right? So like design thinking, systems thinking, and all those other skill set. So they have established some of their own like rules or and like activities. So it's to develop that skill, it's not just something you read, right, and then you learn. So we actually like, have to do it many times so that you get to know the process. So it's about the process of doing it um, that really matters. So I think yeah, our graduate school is it's kind of focused on group learning. So it's very like interactive with other students and with other team members. And we have a lot of like hands-on workshops on doing it. And yeah.
Okay. So it's not like, doing this project on your own, but within a team, then, like, trying to develop an idea with a
Um,
lot of people.
Yeah, I think developing the skills for you to like master that skill, you need to learn it with others. But of course, like you have to do your own research. So you have to do it by yourself, and of course, you have your lab as well to assist you with that. Um, yeah.
Okay. So you've mentioned that your research right now, your sort of target is for the Philippines. Did you like initially plan to do that, or like is it because you're from the Philippines, or like what's the motivation like
Um,
behind that?
yeah, it's precisely because I'm from the Philippines, I guess. Of course, like I want to help my own country, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you have to build something, why not start with your own? I mean, and help the people from your own country. So like that's my main motivation. And I think like in general, I because like I firmly believe that space is for everyone, and there's a lot of space for everyone. I mean, it's not like oh no, we only have space for like engineers, or like for certain space nerds like us. But yeah, so yeah, I think that's partly why I love doing this, like because we always think of space initially, like space exploration, right? Like we go to the moon, we go to the Mars, we build our own rockets, and we conquer um, other planetary systems. But for like the normal people, like who doesn't have any idea of it, like why do we need space, or like why do we need satellites? And especially, for example, in the Philippines, like we didn't have a space agency before, right? And then when we started having our own satellites, then people started asking like, why are we paying for that? And what does it really mean for our lives? So like you always get that question a lot, even from my non-space friends. So I think like coming up with solutions for our society that like that is really like relevant for our everyday life. So that's very empowering, and that's very convincing. It really conveys the message that yes, space is also for them. And yeah, and we need space, and space can help us in a lot of other ways, like yeah, disaster management. And we also have a lot of location based services nowadays, like yeah, our GPS in our phones, uh, the Uber Eats. I mean, a lot of applications from satellite products, basically, so positioning especially. So yeah, people just don't notice it sometimes that they're using actually space tech products. So yeah, that's my motivation, I guess, on why I dig into that
Mm-hmm.
kind of research.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you just mentioned, the Philippines recently established, the space agency. How deeply is the Philippines like currently like involved in space, like in general? Is it like just developing a satellite, or like what are they trying to do right now?
Oh, yeah. So the law was just like signed very recently. I mean, last year. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, less than a year ago, I think. Yeah, so just a few months basically. So it's really, really new. But we have three microsatellites right now in space, and thanks to Japan actually. So like partnership with Japan. So we have the Diwata 1, Diwata 2 satellite, and the Maya 1 as well. So yeah, of course, like I think this is very common for a lot of other emerging space actors. The first priority is usually like Earth observation, right? So yeah, use satellites for Earth observation and taking images um, of your own country and use it for it's usually for agriculture or in disaster management, because it's always the main issues that we have. And so yeah, right now the space agency is still very new, and the director general was just appointed recently. So it's yeah, we expect it to be, you know, much more active in this year and in the coming years.
Would you be like interested in working for the Philippine Space Agency, or?
Let's see. I don't know yet, but to be honest, but yeah, yeah, we'll see. I think I'll just have to wait and see for a while, like
Yeah.
how it goes.
Do they already have a name, or did they actually just like accept?
Yeah, they do. It's just called the Philippine Space Agency, or Philsa.
Philsa, okay.
Philsa, yeah, and I think they have their own logo already.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, okay, so you know, you've just talked about the Philsa. You just talked about Philsa, and then you're currently living in Japan right now. What sort of differences do you see in, you know, this space development or space activities within like both countries?
They are totally different and totally different levels, you know, because the Philippines is just an emerging space actor, right? So it just like it just fairly recently started getting involved with space activities. So, and while here in Japan, like it's much more advanced, and yeah, much more yeah, you have so much activities going on already, and yeah, we are I think like for, of course, the priority in the Philippines for now is again yeah, earth observation, like that's the way I see it. And Japan, yeah, you just have it already. So I mean it's totally different, but yeah, we'll see.
Does the Philippines have any set of technologies that can be transitioned to space tech?
What do you mean,
Like for example, we're hearing from Dr. Richardson from Australia the other week, and he said that Australia also recently just built their own space agency. But what's good about them is that they had aeronautic technology already, and they were able to transition that towards space. So I found that to be pretty interesting.
I think in our case, even if we didn't have the agency yet before, like we have a lot of like agencies, like the space activities is not just centralized into one agency before, you know. So for example, like the Diwata one satellite, so they are developed by a team of Filipino engineers, but they are under the Department of Science and Technology. So it's so you can also look at it that it was already there somehow, like yeah, but it's not just organized into one agency. So now the good thing about this is, you know, it can be like more efficient because there's just one single agency to manage everything, including military. I mean, I think that's one uh, point of I mean interesting point, because it's the Philippines agency is both for like civil and military applications, and it would be directly reporting to the president of the Philippines. So yeah.
You just mentioned, you know, the was it the Diwata one?
Yes.
You know, it was developed with in like one of the agencies in the Philippines. You also mentioned that Japan or JAXA was also sort of involved in that process. You know, how in what way were they involved in, like, you know, what kind of project was that?
It was a joint project. So basically, the Philippines sent like some of their engineers to like study and learn it here in Japan, in Tohoku, in Hokkaido, and in QTech. So yeah, so basically it's like a, yeah, so capacity building like joint initiative as well. So yeah, they had that partnership, and it was launched in the Kibo module of JAXA. And so yeah, the idea was that like it was the first Filipino made satellite. I mean, Filipino made satellites with the help of Japan. It was able to push through. And yeah, like now the idea is to make satellites, I mean, Filipino made satellites in the Philippines. So, yeah, that's the idea. But yeah, I think that was very good start, because yeah, we had some partnership with Japan, and so now we can have our own.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or are they like developing like 100% like a homemade, not homemade, but like homemade satellite in the Philippines, like without any partnerships, or?
Right now, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they have a lot of yeah, I mean, there's a pipeline of like the next generation of satellites coming up. But yeah, let's see, because of the COVID situation, I mean, everything, almost everything is like interrupted anyway. So yeah, let's see.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's almost 10:30. Yeah, it's 10:30, right, Japan? Yeah. It's almost 10:30. And so usually, we open it up for questions from here. So if anyone has questions, again, feel free to post questions on the chat. If not, we'll continue chatting. So again, feel free to post any questions. Okay, let's see. Let me just check if there are any other chat questions here. Okay, so you say, is this your first year living in Japan, or like how long have you been here?
Yeah, just since last year, so just 1 year. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are you trying to finish your master's right now, or are you a PhD student?
Yes. Right now it's just a master's, but we'll see if I continue to PhD. I mean, let's see.
Okay. So what did you initially plan to come to Japan, or like how did that turn out?
I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't initially plan it. I mean, I've always wanted to like go into the space domain, right? Yeah, so I think like what really brought me here is because I was attracted to the STM program of Keio. And yeah, so I was full-time working in the Philippines, and doing other activities as well, like in SGAC and other organizations. But I figured like why not transition, or like why not do both, so I mean, yeah, you can I mean, you can always have like two careers or something, or like why not you mix them up, or like make a way for you to like do two things, do the two things at the same time. So yeah, I applied to Keio, and then yeah, I got in. And of course, I think the scholarship funding is an issue, because it's much more expensive here. I mean, of course, if you compare it to the Philippines, yeah, it really is. So that was also an issue. So I had to apply for a scholarship, and then so it was kind of late already. And when I received the notification that I got the scholarship, then of course, like made a decision of moving here, and yeah, again, changing my trajectory into this field.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So you're, interested in space before you even came here. Then.
Yeah, of course, of course. But at that time, like at least like in my time, we didn't have the aerospace program, so so yeah, there's really not much opportunities in terms of space at that time. So yeah.
Okay. So I'm also living abroad right now. In my case, in the U.S. from Japan, but and I realize there are a couple of people in Japan that are listening to our talk. Do you is there anything that you well like how's your experience living in Japan? And is there anything that you prefer that to have something in Japan that you don't have, or are there anything that you would like to tell the Japanese people here right now? Especially, with the COVID-19, I understand, there are a lot of stressed people who can't go back to their country and whatnot. So if there's anything, you want to talk about.
Yeah, in my case, like I didn't have much problem with living here because I've been here many times before. So like I know the country well already, and yeah, and the culture too. So it wasn't that much of an adjustment on my part. And yeah, so it's like you already have an expectation, and I mean you already know what to expect. So in my case it went yeah, it went smoothly. But I mean for like other foreigners, I know like it's really really hard, especially if it's like their first time coming here and they have to live here for a long time. But yeah, I mean, if you compare it, of course, like this is I mean the standard of living is very different. I think that's the striking difference. Like the cost of living here is like much expensive if you compare it to my country. And well, I like the food, so I don't have much problem with that. And the Philippines is just like 4.5 hours away by plane, direct flight. So it's easy to go home if I want to. So yeah, that's also another good thing about it, I guess. And yeah, I think with this COVID situation that we are in a sort of state of emergency, not a lockdown, but a state of emergency. So I think yeah, that's one of the concerns really of foreigners living in a foreign country, like for example you yourself is living in the US. Yeah, in my case, yeah, I was supposed to go home next week, but of course I had to cancel my flights and everything. But yeah, so far it's good. I mean, I really like the Japanese food, so
Yeah, that's
mm,
good to hear.
yeah, yeah.
I have a question. Going back to the satellite technology topic, where do you see great potential of social applications of satellite technology?
Mm. Um, of course, climate action is one thing. I mean, disasters happen all the time, right? And it's like a long-term problem that we all face, especially here in Japan, Philippines, like the Asian region facing the Pacific Ocean, and the volcanic eruptions, and that kind of disaster. So I think that's one. And another thing that I think would be like a hot topic soon. I mean, even now is the application of satellite and space technology for public health and like, for example, responding to the COVID-19 situation. So like, during these times, like people really like utilize what we have, right? So for example, we use UAVs to disinfect places. So like, I mean, before you don't really do that, right? We just use it for agriculture, and so that's one. And we now make use of a lot of remote sensing and use of satellite data to monitor, what's happening. And even the for example, China, they constructed an entirely new hospital, right, in just a matter of days. I'm not sure if you were aware of that, but they used, of course, like a satellite imaging so that they can properly monitor the construction progress and activities. So I think like that's another area that right now, like, people are now appreciating about space, because it's really really helpful right now in the COVID situation. And lastly, that is on the top of my mind is the use of AI, machine learning, basically. With you mix it with satellite data, and you can come up with a lot of solutions to that. You can come up with a lot of products for that, and I think that's one of the things that most startups right now are like looking at. And yeah, and I think that was just last year. Not sure if they already launched it, but the ESA has this FESAT. Have you heard of it?
What is it? VSAT?
Phi, like the Greek alphabet Phi.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like so I think it was the first satellite. It was a CubeSat, I think, to have like an AI chip in the satellite itself. So you are not just using AI, here on Earth, processing the data that you get, but you you put AI in the satellite itself, deploy it in space, so that so because they generate a lot of data, right? And you need humans and I mean geospatial analysts for that, like to make sense of that tons of data. So if you have that AI with you in space already, so it has its own brain already, basically, to filter out the data that it sends back to Earth, right? So like it's kind of efficient, and it makes analyzing it here on Earth much more faster. And yeah, I think that's one of the things that is interesting recently.
I just posted a link
Oh,
on the chat talking about the ESA satellite with the AI chip that you just talked about. So for anyone who's interested, you can check that out.
just a quick question to follow up to what you just mentioned is what's like you may have mentioned this, but what's the advantage of actually having an AI chip on the satellite versus like actually analyzing the data using AI on Earth? Like, what's the difference between there?
So if you have the AI chip there already, like so the data, the images that it transmits is already like filtered out, or like basically like there's much lesser noise, for example. And so like it's much more intelligent, much more useful, so it's much efficient and less time consuming.
So like the satellite sort of like selectively collects data. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, interesting. So we do have a question. Okay, I'll read it out, are there other universities that have courses similar to the one you're majoring in?
Yes. So our graduate school this program is patterned with the MIT one. So MIT also has its system design and management. So that's where that's where we started, I think. So we also have before we have like professors from MIT to come over as well. So yeah, I think because STM and this kind of thinking and methodology is kind of new. So for example, our graduate school is just 10 years old. So it's really really new. So yeah, MIT has it. But here in Japan, as far as I know, it's the only university offering this program. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's also one of the reasons why I was really like motivated to join this university, Keio, and not other universities. I actually didn't apply to any other universities because I was just really hooked into this unique program that they have.
What sort of paths do system design and management graduates take, whether it's academia or in the private or public sector?
I think it's usually in the private sector. Yeah, because I mean, some even form their own companies afterwards. But because you develop the skill set to like develop some new idea, right, and then like generate new value out of something. So yeah, I think there's a trend in that respect. But because basically like this program is the diploma is like systems engineering, right? So most of them be a systems engineer for private companies. Yeah.
We have another question. Question is, I often hear that people are trying to start business about space nowadays, and how do they make profit?
Yes, that is true. I also hear that a lot, and I see it a lot with the booming space startups that we have. So usually, I mean, they make profit with the analysis of the data. So they offer, basically what they offer is a solution based on how they analyze it and come up with something, like a software to like predict this or that, or yeah, it's usually like that, because you have your data, and how you analyze it, it's really like up to you. I mean, even if we send a lot of satellite out there, it's, for me, it's really how you make use of it. So that's how they usually make profit, like analysis, geospatial analysis, for example. And yeah, that's usually the case.
Speaking of profit, like, so those data that you sort of use, do you have to buy those, or are those like available for the public?
We actually have data available for the public. Yeah, for example, like the ESA has its Sentinel satellites, right? So it's actually open. Yeah, you can access the data on your own, and we even use, for example, like Google Earth Engine. So it's also a free open source platform where you can make some analysis of your own, although it's not for commercial purposes, just for learning purposes. But yeah, you do have you do have satellite images which are free, but of course it would still be much better if you have your own satellite and your own photos, taking photos of your just your target area. So yeah, that's
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, we have another question. I agree space is for everyone and space technology has a huge potential. I want to join in some research with satellites for my master's, but sometimes I can't help wondering what if the technology I dedicate to will bring a tragedy like in a war. Maybe too delusional, but I'm curious how you feel about
Yes, thank you. I feel the same way. I think that's one of the things that systems engineers, always feel. Because you develop something and you design something, and for you, for example, like it's something useful. It can perform these functions and that functions, but actually, like you can think about it as a maybe a weapon as well, right? Like I mean, that's an issue with satellites too. Like we built satellites, but now there's like certain functionalities of satellites that can somehow be threatening to other satellites and may be perceived as yeah, provoking war, or so that's certainly a thing to consider. And yeah, even in my case, we are always reminded of that too. Like the use case, like what are the possible uses of your system, of your thing, that the thing that you're building. So that is also yeah, very important role. I think it's always there, like the thought will I mean that thought will always be there, but you don't have to worry much about it. You have your advisors, and you have this program anyway. So yeah, I really hope you continue with that still, even if you have that feeling. Yeah, I still think it can be yeah, we can just focus on the civilian side. Yeah.
it. Are there like any sort of advices to not sure where she or he is from, but like, for instance, maybe like you're from a country like the Philippines, or from a little more developing countries compared to Japan, like how, and if you want to do space, for instance, like what kind of advice would you give to those who are trying to um, build a career in space?
um you mean for people in developing countries, or
Or who did, like in the Philippines, you, at least when you came to Japan, it wasn't, you didn't have a space agency and whatnot. So for countries who are from a similar situation, what kind of advice would you give?
um I think you you just have to just have to do it. I mean, it doesn't have to be that uh you are scared to do it because you're not an expert about it. I mean, in my case, I always believe that there's nothing wrong with learning or doing something you're not an expert on, or like for example, like you're an engineer, and I often get this question a lot, like, you're an engineer, but why are you like talking about business or management, or like you're supposed to be just talking about like technical stuff. So for me, like space is like that. You don't have to be really in the STEM field initially to do something in space. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities in space, and we don't just need scientists and engineers, right? We need social scientists, we need journalists, we need a lot of competencies. So we are yeah, it's not limited to just being an engineer or a scientist.
Does your program that you're in right now, like, are there a lot of people who are not like from the STEM field, or like what kind of backgrounds like do you
Yes. So actually, in my graduate school, yeah, some of them are in the uh social sciences or like finance background or like management background or different backgrounds, economics. But so yeah, it's just a matter of like what kind of system you want to make, right? Like where do you want to apply it? I mean, in my case, it's about space, but like some people go into like supply chain or like business side or whatever that is. So it's really up to you.
Okay. Are there any questions? Okay. So what's your, do you have any plans after you get your degree, or like is there anything you want to do, you would like to do in the future?
You mean like after getting my degree?
Or yeah, I mean, yeah, or it could be, during your degree, it applies to both. But.
I I don't know yet if I'm continuing to my PhD, but it's definitely something about space. I mean, you're already here and you're already doing this, so I actually think there's a lot of opportunities like after this, and I mean, there's a lot of options for me. So I'm still like considering everything, so I haven't really decided it yet. But of course, eventually I plan to go home and like help the country and like make something for it. Yeah.
Okay. What in your opinion, what do you think the Philippines is like sort of most struggling with, which potentially space could sort of resolve that?
I still think it's disaster management. I mean, like we really face a lot of typhoons, and disaster preparedness and prevention, and I mean, I can still see a lot of improvements where space can be used. So yeah, I still think that's the main thing. Yeah.
Okay. Like how do you actually sort of use that technology to prevent for disaster management? Like I know that you could use satellites to track the typhoon and stuff, but like besides that, like how can you actually solve those problems using space technology?
Yeah, aside from that earth observation, again, I think like we can use the positioning technologies that we have to to improve it. And I think early warning systems would be like much helpful.
Early warning systems, okay.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit more about your work with small-scale fishers or fishing ships. What are the needs or the issues that they have, and how do you use satellite technology to solve them?
Yeah, so so for example, one is that like for the social issue, like they don't so there's an issue of like registering the vessel, right? Like because ideally you need some sort of identification and registration for that fishing vessel, right? But sometimes like you don't really want that because you don't want to be monitored. Right. So I mean it because the issue is like the illegal fishing and unregulated fishing, the IUU fishing. So that's one issue. And I think like the thing that I want to focus on as well is like the safety of the fishermen. So especially if you go out to the sea and there's a typhoon, or like there's a disaster as well. So people die there actually, and it's also a very risky like profession. So I think like having those sensors and knowing your location while fishing would be beneficial with that respect. as well, because like because when you can't communicate and people don't know where you are exactly when you went to the sea. So yeah, that's one of the things that I'm considering.
How significant is the problem of illegal or unregistered fishing ships? Is that like a huge percentage of?
Yes, yes. So it's actually like the problem is that like it's even hard to calculate like how much illegal fishing do we have. So that's also where like satellite images come into play. So modeling the fishing activities and estimating how much illegal fishing activities do we have. So that's a one thing. And yeah, another thing is, yeah, again, they're not monitored, so like that's the point. So they don't have much data about it. But especially in the case of like small fishing, right? Because like the big fishing vessels, like you already have and they are mandated by law to have that like AIS that I mentioned. But for the smaller ones, they don't really require any like sensor or what tracking device to be installed there, so it's not monitored. And I think another issue is that like so you have the big ships and the small fishing, right? So there's actually like a boundary for that, like okay, this space, like after like a certain kilometers from the shore, so that's where the big ships are like allowed to go into. And then like the coastal area, they are for the smaller fishing vessels. So sometimes the problem as well is like, because there's no monitoring of some sort, so the big ones go to like the closer to the shore. So there's a competition for the fishing area. So you can see like there's a lot of issues like in that social context. So you need to factor everything for you to come up with like an effective system for that. Yeah.
We have one last question. I'd like to finish it up with this one, since you've only got a couple of minutes. Okay, the last question is, how would you explain the meaning of developing space tech and industry when people, again, spending a lot of money on space, asked about it? So how would you, sort of explain the benefit of spending money, for space, basically?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you want to explain it to. For example, like like for example, kids or like teenagers, for example. I think like the best way to explain it would be by an example, or like okay, get your phone, and then explain how you can't get your Uber Eats delivery if you don't have these satellites up in space and internet. So I think like people generally understand the value of it with concrete examples. So yeah, the internet that we all use every day now is a perfect example for that.
All right, thank you very much. Lastly, well, actually, there are two things. First, I would like to talk a little bit about the upcoming event related to the Asia Pacific, SGAC Asia Pacific region. So I don't know, Bernadette, maybe you want to talk about it, but yeah, go ahead.
Yes, so here in the Asia Pacific region, we have an annual workshop for students and young professionals who are interested in space. And I mean, again, you don't have to be like an engineer or scientist working in the space field, but if you are interested in, in space and you want to meet these experts in the field, so we have this workshop. It's going to be in October. this year in Vietnam in conjunction with the Asia Pacific Regional Space Agency Forum. So this event is it's going to be in Vietnam, and you can see more details I think in the link. So if you are interested, like please apply. We will be opening our applications for that, and we also have some scholarship or like funding support for this event. So you can also try that out, and we look forward to have you there.
And all of us three here on camera, we're all in the organizing team for the event last year. So, if you have any questions, feel free to email us or contact us. With that, we'll finish the event for today. Lastly, we would really appreciate if you could answer the questionnaire, which we've posted a link on the chat as well, to improve our talks in the future. So with that, thank you very much for joining, and we'll see you next week. Yep. Do have a comment here. Actually, my friend mentioned those before, and he says we already have those sent to our big countries. Why do we small countries still developing space tech? Yeah, too. Thanks for answering. Oh, it was a comment from your previous answer, probably.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, thank you. Go ahead.
All right. Do I have to answer this as well?
If you want to, sure.
Yeah. I think it's I think there are still other things that we don't get from like the big countries. So yeah, I mean we can we have a lot of answers for this one, but yeah, it's a really good question. That's actually hard, but sometimes you justify it with like not just the financial issue, but with like very specific ones for your country. So I mean, yeah, anyway, if you guys have any other further questions, I think I can also like answer it via email or something. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Bernadette, thank you very much, and thank you everyone who listened, tuned into this talk. With that, we'll end the session for this week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.